Smoke covered the battlefield like a thick, dirty blanket. Sparks jumped from burning metal. Bodies of both humans and aliens lay scattered in the mud. Rain began to fall, cold and heavy, washing blood into the earth in the middle of it all. An alien warrior lay still. Her name was Karathy, and she was once proud, once feared, once powerful. But now she could not move her legs. Her armor was shattered at the waist. Her pulse weak. She had been fighting for her people, and now they were gone. Above her, drops of rain tapped against her helmet. She blinked slowly, trying to stay awake. She heard footsteps, many of them. Her own kind, the Valari, walked past her without stopping. One glanced down at her, and then looked away. "She's done," he said coldly. "She can't be saved," another one muttered. "She slow us down," said a third, and then they vanished into the smoke. Karathy gritted her teeth. She wanted to scream, but her voice was broken too. She had given everything for her unit, and they had left her behind. More hours passed. She couldn't tell if it was day or night. Only the burning sky gave her light. She thought this was the end. She would die here alone, forgotten, weak. Then she heard it. A single steady set of footsteps. Not like her people's quick march. These were heavy, human boots. She tried to lift her weapon, but her arm refused to move. She lay helpless. As a figure stepped through the smoke, a tall human soldier, carrying a blaster rifle. His armor was scratched, his helmet cracked. Blood stained his side, but he stood strong. He paused when he saw her. Their eyes met. Karathy expected him to raise his weapon, expected death, but instead, he lowered his rifle. He looked around, saw no one, then walked toward her. Step by step he came closer. She tried to speak, but only a weak growl came out. Still, he didn't flinch. He knelt beside her and checked her wounds, carefully, without fear. "Your legs are gone," he muttered, more to himself. His voice was deep. Then he looked into her eyes again. "I'm not leaving you," he said simply. Karathy blinked in disbelief. What did that mean? Why would a human save an enemy? The soldier slid his arms under her and gently lifted her. Pain shot through her body. She let out a sharp cry, but he didn't stop. He grunted under her weight, stood up slowly, and began to walk. Every step was hard. The mud sucked at his boots. Rain turned the ground to sludge. Explosions still echoed in the distance, but the human kept walking, holding her like she was someone worth saving. She could see his name tag now. E. Graves. She had heard of him before. Sergeant Eli Graves. A human known not for cruelty, but for saving lives, even alien ones. She didn't understand him. He was the enemy. But he didn't treat her like a prisoner. He treated her like a person. After an hour of walking, he found a crashed transport ship. The inside was burned but dry. He laid her gently against a wall and took off his helmet. Steam rose from his face in the cold air. He looked exhausted, but not angry, not afraid. He pulled out a thermal blanket and wrapped her in it. Then he opened his rations. Without saying a word, he offered her food. She didn't move, just stared at him, but he left it beside her anyway. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. "Why? Save me?" He looked at her for a moment, then shrugged. "Because you were left behind," he said, "and no one deserves that." Karathy looked away. For the first time in her life she felt something strange. Respect. For a human, outside, the war still raged, but in that broken ship, a silent promise had been made. He would not abandon her, and she would never forget it. Asterisk, the firelight flickered softly against broken metal walls. Rain tapped the wrecked roof like a lullaby for the wounded. Inside the husk of a ruined transport ship, silence hung heavy, except for the slow breathing of two enemies who were no longer at war. Karathy couldn't sleep, the pain in her spine was deep and constant, but something else kept her awake. The human who had carried her from death's grip. Sergeant Eli Graves sat across the room, his back against the wall, one arm wrapped around a blaster. His helmet was on the ground beside him. His eyes were closed, but Karathy knew he wasn't sleeping. She didn't understand him. Why didn't he leave her, like the others? Why had he fought his way through fire just to keep her alive? Karathy tried again to move her legs. Nothing. Still dead. Still cold. She hated this feeling. To be helpless. To be weak in front of a human. Suddenly, the radio on Eli's wrist crackled to life. A rough voice spoke through the static. "Sergeant. Graves, status? This is command. Final evac in 15 minutes. Get to the coordinates or be left behind." He didn't answer. The voice repeated, louder this time. "Eli. Respond. This is your last chance. Do you copy?" Karathy watched closely. Would he go? Would he leave her like everyone else? Her heart pounded. Eli didn't even look at the radio. He slowly took out the power cell and shut it off. The light from the screen died. So did his chance to leave. Karathy's eyes widened slightly. Why? Not go? She asked, her voice weak. Her people had taught her humans were selfish. Yet here he was, choosing to stay in enemy ruins, with a paralyzed alien warrior. Eli looked at her, tired but calm. His voice was quiet, almost like he was talking to himself. "Because you're still breathing." He stood up and walked to her side. "Because someone should do the right thing. Even when no one's watching." She stared at him, speechless. She didn't believe in mercy, not until now. She had lived her whole life by blade and strength. Now she was surviving because of kindness. Outside, the sky rumbled. Thunder rolled. Like distant war drums. But inside, something else was changing. Trust, quiet and slow, was forming between them. Later that night, Eli started working. He took parts from the broken ship tubes, wires and panels. Karathy watched as he built something beside her, metal bars shaped like a frame, curved like legs. "What is that?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "A brace," he said without stopping. "You'll walk again. Not today, but one step at a time." Karathy was silent for a long moment, then whispered, "Why do you care?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed to a mark on his armor, a claw symbol, alien in design. "My brother once saved a Velari," he said. She returned the favor. "Saved me," he looked at her. "I guess I'm just paying the debt forward." Karathy turned her head away. A flicker of emotion crossed her sharp face. She never thought a human could be honorable. That night, while Eli repaired the brace, she stared at the fire, thinking of the soldiers who left her, the commanders who called her lost cargo, and now this lone human, who had said nothing heroic, done nothing for reward, only chosen to stay. She didn't know his full story, but she knew enough. Enough to understand he was different. When Eli finally stopped working, he wrapped his cloak around her again. "Get some rest," he said, voice tired. "I'll keep watch." She wanted to argue, wanted to say she didn't need help, but her body was too weak, and somehow, the warmth of that old human jacket made her eyes grow heavy. As she drifted off to sleep, for the first time since the war began, she felt safe, and the last thing she saw was the human soldier, sitting near the door, eyes sharp, weapon ready, not as a jailer, but as a guardian. The storm outside screamed like wounded machines. Winds pulled at the wrecked ship's hull, making it groan in pain. Lightning flashed through broken metal, lighting up two figures hidden inside. Karathy woke up slowly, her body aching in 1,000 places, but the fire was still warm, the blanket still covered her, and the human soldier was still there. Eli Graves sat by the opening of the wreckage, his rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the fog beyond the ruins like a hunter waiting for a predator. He hadn't slept, not even for a minute. The ship they hid in had once been a Velari transport. Sleek, fast, built for medics and messengers. Now it was only twisted steel and memories, inside. Ailey had turned the wreck into something strange. A camp, a home, and a battlefield all in one. Karathy's gaze moved to the strange object beside her. A frame of bent metal and leather straps. It looked ugly, but it smelled of new hope. A leg brace, handmade by a human with calloused hands. She didn't speak right away. She simply watched him work. He was fixing the power core of a portable heater, using parts that shouldn't fit, but somehow he made them fit. "I thought humans weren't good at machines," she muttered. Eli didn't look up. "That's the thing about humans," he said. "We learn when we have no choice." She looked down at her own body. Her legs still refused to move. She touched her side, still bandaged from where shrapnel had torn her skin. The bandages were human. The stitching was rough but strong. He had done it. Back on her ship, such wounds would have meant a medal. Here, they meant nothing except survival. "Are we behind enemy lines?" she asked, her voice low. Eli finally looked at her. "No lines left," he said. "Just broken people and broken promises." Karathy didn't understand what that meant fully, but it made her chest feel tight. The heater sparked to life suddenly. A faint hum filled the room, and warmth touched her skin. She almost forgot what heat felt like, and for the first time, her sharp alien eyes softened. "You're fixing too much," she said slowly. "I'm not your mission." Eli smiled faintly. "No, you're not," he replied, "but you're still here." The quiet between them grew thicker. Then Karathy asked something she hadn't dared to before. "Do your people know what you're doing?" Ayla's face grew still. "My commander thinks I'm dead," he said, "and maybe I am to them. Then why stay?" She asked again, sharper now. "Why risk your life for me?" He placed the repaired heater gently near her feet, and for a moment, he didn't answer. Then, without looking at her, he whispered, "Because no one should die just because they're inconvenient." Karathy said nothing. Her people had rules. If a warrior couldn't walk, they were left. It was tradition, survival, law. But this human, he had no law guiding him, only choice that made him more dangerous than any general. Because kindness could never be predicted. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the far side of the ship. A crunch of metal footsteps. Both of them froze. Eli turned off the heater instantly, grabbed his rifle, and motioned for silence. He crept toward the sound like a ghost. Karathy couldn't see him, but she could feel the tension return. Then a shot rang out, followed by silence. A few moments later, Eli returned, dragging a body behind him, a scavenger wrapped in armor and rags, a small plasma knife clutched in a cold, dead hand. Eli dropped the body near the door. "He was looking for fuel," he said simply. Karathy nodded slowly. "You didn't kill him because of me?" Eli shook his head. "I killed him because he was going to hurt us. Us." The word echoed in her mind. No one had used that word with her in days. Maybe even years. Eli returned to her side and helped her adjust her position. She was too proud to thank him, but she didn't stop him either. As the storm howled once more, the wreckage around them stopped feeling like a grave and began feeling like a fortress. Together, two strangers, one alien, one human, one broken in body, the other in soul, sat side by side. Not as enemies, but as survivors, and maybe, just maybe, something more. She dreamed of fire, of her legs moving through battle, of her blades slicing the air, of victory, until she woke up and couldn't even feel her toes. Karathy opened her eyes to a new day. The storm outside had passed, but inside her chest, a different storm remained. She was a Valari warrior, bred for war, trained to never fall. And now she couldn't even stand. Her eyes moved toward the human Eli Graves. He was boiling water over a flame he made from broken ship wires. He looked tired, but never angry, never bitter. Even when her sharp words tried to push him away, "Your strength will return," he said softly. Handing her a warm drink, she took it, pretending she didn't need it. But the warmth calmed her shaking hands. Every day now had a rhythm. Eli would help her stretch, then try to move her legs, then build something new to make her life easier. But Karathy wasn't used to needing help, and her pride burned hotter than her wounds. "You don't need to keep doing this," she growled one morning. Eli didn't stop tightening the brace around her thigh. "Yes, I do," he replied calmly. She hated that. How he stayed calm even when she was spitting fire. How he didn't argue, didn't fight back, just kept helping. Once, when she tried to roll herself toward the exit, she collapsed face first into the dirt. Eli rushed to her, tried to lift her, but she slapped his hand away. "I said I don't need you." She snarled. "You're wrong," he said quietly, "because I'm already here." That night, she sat in silence, watching the fire crackle between them. "I used to train 10 hours a day," she whispered. "My body was a weapon." Eli poked the fire with a metal rod. "What is it now?" he asked. She didn't answer because she didn't know. The next day, Eli built 2 poles from scraps. He attached them to her arms with support bands. "When you're ready," he said, "you'll walk." She laughed bitterly. "I'm not ready." "Then we'll wait," he said, not pushing her, not mocking her, just waiting. Each day after that, she tried. Sometimes she cried silently when he wasn't looking. Sometimes she screamed in anger, not pain. Sometimes she sat for hours, staring at her useless legs, wondering if she was still the same person. But Eli kept showing up, kept offering his hand without pride or pity, and something in her began to shift. One morning, she managed to pull herself upright with the poles. Her arms shook, her breathing grew sharp, but she stood for 3 full seconds. When she fell, Eli caught her, and for the first time, she didn't push him away. "You're not broken," he said. "You're rebuilding." Later, as they sat under a piece of broken ceiling, turned into a roof, Karathy asked the question she had been holding inside. "What do you get from all this?" Eli didn't answer at first. Then he looked at her with eyes that had seen too much war. "I lost people," he said. "Too many. Because no one helped when they needed it most." He looked at her and added, "I'm not letting that happen again." Karathy looked at him for a long time, and then she did something rare. She nodded. The next day, she tried again, and the next, and the next. Slowly, her arms grew stronger. Her core tightened. She could sit without support, balance on her knees, and even shift her weight. Progress was slow, but real, and every step forward felt like a battle won one night, as stars peeked through holes in the metal ceiling. Karathy said softly, "You're not what I expected a human to be." Eli smiled faintly. "You're not what I expected either," she laughed. A quiet, strange sound. It hurt a little, but it felt good. Like something inside her was healing. Too, she still couldn't run, still couldn't fight like she used to. But she no longer felt like a burden. She was becoming something else. A survivor with purpose. And it was the human who had reminded her how to begin. The silence was broken, not by wind or rain, but by a scream, sharp and distant. It echoed across the valley of metal wreckage. A warning, a signal. They had been found. Eli's head snapped up. He was sharpening a piece of broken steel into a blade. Karathy was resting on the hover sled he'd built from scraps, but her eyes locked onto his the moment the sound reached her ears. That was no wild animal, no accident. It was a hunting call, and it wasn't human. "They're here," she whispered. Eli didn't ask who they were. He just grabbed his rifle and moved fast. He had prepared for this: 2 escape routes, 3 fallback shelters, and a hidden stash of supplies just in case. But what he didn't prepare for was her, still too weak to crawl on her own, still bound to that hover sled like a fallen queen. "You need to go," she said sharply. "I'll slow you down." He turned toward her, face unreadable. "I don't leave people behind," he said. "You know that by now." She growled, frustrated. "I'm not people, I'm a liability." "You're my partner," he said, and that shut her up. He loaded her onto the sled quickly, tied her in place with harness straps, grabbed a pulse detonator, and scattered dust behind them to cover their trail. As they moved, the sounds behind them grew louder, not just footsteps, now laughter, low and cruel. Alien voices speaking in a language even Karathy didn't want to remember. "Who are they?" Eli asked, glancing back. Karathy's jaw tightened. "They're called the Skarn. They hunt survivors for sport." He didn't need more detail. The way her voice turned cold was enough. The hover sled buzzed low across the rocky floor. Eli pulled it manually, his hands raw from rope burns, but he never slowed down, never looked tired. They passed the old battlefield, a place where bones still peeked from shattered armor, where banners hung torn on scorched stone, and where even ghosts had stopped screaming. Up ahead, Eli said. There's a canyon-tight walls. One way in. Karathy nodded. A good place for a trap. They reached the canyon just as the Skarn came into view, 6 figures in bone armor, their eyes glowing red. One held a Velari banner, Karathy's banner, taken after her fall. Her blood boiled, not in shame, but in rage. Eli shoved the sled into the shadows and raised his rifle. You ready? He asked. I can't stand, she replied. But I can shoot. He tossed her a sidearm. Her fingers curled around it like it had never left her hand. The Skarn came fast, laughter turning to snarls, weapons raised. But they didn't expect resistance, especially not from her. Eli fired first clean, precise. One Skarn dropped before the others even realized. Karathy fired second. Her bullet pierced another's breathing mask. The alien dropped to its knees, choking. They moved like a team, one human, one paralyzed alien, covering each other with perfect timing. When one tried to flank from above, Karathy shouted the warning, "Top ridge!" Eli turned, fired, and the enemy fell like a stone. The last 2 Skarn hesitated. Confused, this wasn't how prey acted. Eli threw a flash mine. The light blinded the canyon for a second. And when it cleared, he was gone, so were Karathy and the sled. They didn't stop until the sun was down, until the night cloaked them in blackened stars. They hid beneath a thick root system from alien trees. Eli's hands trembled as he patched up his shoulder. Karathy looked at him and whispered, I thought I was the one being protected. You were, he said, breathing hard. But today, we protected each other. She looked at her weapon, still warm in her hand, and realized her aim was still perfect. Her warrior's instinct, still sharp. Her courage, never gone, only buried. You fought like one of us, she told him. Eli chuckled. No, I fought like myself, he replied. But I learned from the best. They sat in silence for a while. 2 fugitives who had just defied death together, and for the first time. Since she had fallen on that battlefield, Karathy didn't feel like a broken soldier. She felt like a warrior again. The nights were colder now. Not because of the wind, but because they were getting closer to human territory, and that meant fewer places to hide. More drones in the sky, more eyes watching. Eli Graves pulled the hover sled across a cracked landscape that once held cities. Now there was only dust bones, and broken steel towers pointing at the sky like forgotten prayers. Karathy lay on the sled, her hands gripping the rails as the sled bumped and groaned over old war scars. Her body still weak, her legs still lifeless, but her mind sharper than ever. How much further? She asked through chapped lips. Eli didn't stop walking. 3 more days, maybe 4, he said. If we don't run into drones or scavengers. Or your own army, she added. He didn't laugh, didn't even smile, because she was right. They were both walking into a place that might not welcome either of them. You still want to take me there? She asked quietly. He glanced back. I didn't carry you this far just to leave you behind. Each day of travel bled into the next. But each day, Karathy grew a little stronger. Her arms were powerful now, her posture straighter. She began pulling herself into a sitting position without help. Then she started helping Eli fix the sled, scout from a distance, and sometimes keep watch while he slept. She had become his partner, not just his passenger at night. They sat under rusted satellite dishes and dead trees, sharing stories over half rations and filtered rainwater. Eli spoke of Earth, of crowded cities, old music, dogs. Karathy spoke of her homeworld of sky-hunting birds, crystal seas, and honor duels at dawn. I used to think humans were monsters, she confessed one night. I used to think aliens were emotionless machines, he replied. Then they both laughed quietly, because now, neither could imagine surviving without the other. On the 6th day, disaster struck. A patrol drone flew low, too low. They were spotted, and in minutes, a strike team was inbound. "Leave me," Karathy told him again, her voice cold and sharp like the old days. "Drop me and go. You can still run." But Eli wasn't that man. He never had been. He threw her over his shoulder, growling in pain as he ran. And she didn't fight him this time. They escaped into a narrow gorge filled with fog and thorn roots. A place so dangerous, even the hunters wouldn't follow there. They collapsed beneath an overhang of alien stone. Eli's chest heaved with every breath. Karathy reached over and touched his shoulder. It was the first time she had touched him gently. "You're going to get yourself killed," she whispered. He looked at her, eyes red with exhaustion. "Not today," he said, "because you're coming with me all the way to the end." That night, she stayed awake while he slept, and when he began to shiver, she pulled his coat around both of them. Even without her legs, she could protect him. And that meant something to her, something new. On the 7th morning, they saw it, a tall tower rising in the distance, shining like hope. It was the edge of human territory, and if they made it there, they might be safe. But as they approached, they were stopped. A drone dropped from the sky, armed, scanning, and cold. It pointed its weapons at Eli, then at her. "State your name and allegiance," the drone barked in a mechanical voice. Eli raised his hand slowly. "Sergeant Eli Graves," he said, returning from deep field with a survivor. The drone scanned Karathy and let out a harsh beep. "Target identified. Velari combatant. Classified enemy species. Termination approved." Karathy tensed. So did Eli. But before the drone could fire, Eli stepped in front of her, his voice calm but firm. "She's under my protection," he said. "Anyone who shoots her will have to go through me." The drone paused. The delay was unusual then. It spoke again. "Sergeant Eli Graves. Record shows Valor citation. Special authority granted." The drone floated backward and powered down. The path was clear, but neither of them moved for a long time. Karathy looked at him, the human who had risked death over and over, just so she could see the sun rise again. "You could have died," she said. Eli looked at her and shrugged. "Yeah," he said softly. "But I didn't." She didn't smile, but her eyes did, because for the first time since the war began, she saw a future, not alone, not hunted, not broken, but with him. And they walked forward, together, toward whatever came next. It was strange to wake up under clean sheets, to breathe air that wasn't full of smoke, to feel warm sunlight through glass instead of firelight through metal cracks. Karathy opened her eyes slowly. The room was bright, sterile, and quiet. She was no longer in a broken ship or a battlefield cave. She was in a human medical center. For a moment, she thought she had died, until the door opened and Eli Graves walked in, still in uniform, still carrying a coffee cup that steamed in. "The cold air. You're awake," he said with a small smile. Karathy blinked at him. "How long?" "2 days," he answered. "You collapsed after the drone incident." "Your body needed time." She tried to sit up. Her arms moved easily, but her legs moved too. She froze, then slowly lifted the blanket. What she saw made her chest tighten. Her legs were still there, but now they were fused with glowing human tech, shining metal joints, wrapped in synthetic muscle. She was part machine now, but not less more. Eli noticed her stare. "They offered to give you mobility," he said. "They asked me what you'd want. I told them you'd want to walk. Again, or away." She looked at him sharply. "And what if I had wanted to die?" He shrugged. "Then I would have carried you until you changed your mind." She didn't reply, but her fingers clenched the edge of the blanket. Not in fear, in strength. Later that afternoon, she stood, first with support, then with her own power. Her feet were different, silent, precise, but she could feel every step through the new nerve links. A human technician stood nearby, watching with wide eyes, You're adapting quickly." He whispered, "I'm a warrior," Karethi said without hesitation. "I don't adapt, I take command." And for the first time in weeks she walked across the room. Slowly, carefully, but with her head held high, Eli stood back, watching her like one might watch a sunrise after a long dark war. She turned to him. "Don't look at me like I'm a miracle," she said. "I am what happens when you refuse to give up." He smiled faintly. "I know," he replied. "You taught me that." Word of her survival spread quickly through the human base. Some were confused. Why save an enemy? Others whispered she was dangerous. But most were silent, watching, waiting. Then came the moment no one expected. A message from the Valari, her people, the ones who had left her to die. A diplomat requested to speak to her, not because they cared, but because now she was something valuable. A bridge between worlds, a symbol of survival. Karethi stood before the screen as the Valari emissary appeared. His face was familiar, one of the officers who had turned away on the battlefield. "We wish to honor your return," he said, "to restore your name, give you rank." "No," she said flatly. "I am not returning." The emissary blinked. "You refuse your own blood?" She turned to look at Eli, who stood silently nearby, then back to the screen. "I found something stronger than blood," she said. "I found someone who carried me when I couldn't walk, who fought for me when my people left, who gave me my legs and my future." She leaned forward slightly. "You want me now because I lived, but he wanted me when I was dying." The screen went dark, and just like that, she was no longer Valari in the eyes of her empire, but in her own heart. She had never stood taller. Days passed. Karethi trained again, this time in a human facility, running drills, lifting weights, rebuilding her strength with quiet fury. Humans watched from behind glass walls, some afraid, some amazed, none who could look away. One day, a commander approached Eli. "You know she could leave. Turn on us, spy for them." Eli nodded. "She could," he replied. "But she won't. How can you be sure?" Eli glanced toward Karethi, who was sparring with two Marines at once, both losing. "She doesn't fight for flags anymore," he said. "She fights for the ones who stood beside her." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Karethi found Eli on the rooftop, watching the stars. She sat beside him in silence. "You're quiet," he said. She looked up at the stars. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About who I am now," she replied. "I'm not Valari, not fully human, not a soldier of any army." "Then what are you?" She smiled softly. "I'm a warrior of my own making." And in the quiet that followed, the stars above them didn't feel cold anymore, because even across species, across war, two souls had found each other, not through power, but through mercy. And in that mercy, a broken warrior had risen again, stronger than ever.